My father stole $20,000 from my teenage jobs. Years later, he comes back demanding I pay his $80K debt. But I got a restraining order and exposed them all. I'm 24 years old, work part-time at a restaurant while finishing college, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened basically destroyed any possibility of having a normal relationship with my parents. I guess I should start from the beginning. When I was a kid and thought all families were like mine, with that level of extreme control that I now know wasn't normal at all, but at the time was just my life. My father, Frank, was and still is a person obsessed with power and control. I don't remember a single day of my childhood when I didn't feel watched. Like everything I did was being evaluated and judged. My mother, Ruth, never did anything to stop him, always backed him up, always found a way to justify his actions, no matter how absurd they were. I have a sister, Natalie, who's 2 years younger than me, and she lived through the same thing, though I think it was worse with me because I was the oldest and I guess my father saw me as an extension of himself or something, I don't know. The rules in my house were ridiculous. Seriously, I couldn't go out without explicit permission. I couldn't have friends without my father interrogating them first. I couldn't close my bedroom door. I couldn't even use the phone without them checking afterward who I'd talked to. It was like living in a prison, but everyone told you it was for your own good. You know what I mean? I remember perfectly when I was 14, almost 15, and there was a girl in my class named something like Andrea or Adriana. I don't remember well, but the point is we were friends. Just friends. We sat together in the cafeteria and studied together sometimes. One day my father found a message from her on my phone. It was something super innocent like, "See you tomorrow to study math," or something like that, and he made a huge drama out of it. He sat me down in the living room and interrogated me for literally 2 hours about who she was, what relationship we had, if we were doing something inappropriate, if her parents knew we were friends. It was humiliating. And when I explained that we were just classmates, he accused me of being a liar, said that men and women can't be just friends, that I was being manipulated or that I was trying to manipulate her. It was total madness. In the end, he forbade me from talking to her and checked my phone every day for months to make sure I had blocked her. My mother just watched from the kitchen, and when I asked her for help, she said, "Your father knows what he's doing. He's protecting you." Protecting me from what? From having a normal life? Things got really bad when I turned 16 and got my first job at a neighborhood grocery store. I was so excited. Seriously. I thought I was finally going to have some independence, that I was going to be able to buy my own things, maybe save for a car or for college, normal things teenagers do. My first day was amazing. I felt like an adult for the first time in my life, earning my own money, talking to new people, doing something productive. I worked after school and on weekends, 20 hours a week or so, and at first my parents seemed proud. My father even told me he was happy I was learning responsibility. But when my first paycheck came, everything changed. I had $300 or something. It wasn't much, but for me it was a fortune. I got home super excited, showed it to my parents thinking they were going to congratulate me, and my father extended his hand and said, "Give it to me." I laughed because I thought he was joking. But no, he was completely serious. He told me that since I lived under his roof and ate his food and used his electricity, the least I could do was contribute. I told him yes, that I could give him something to help with expenses, like $50 or something. But he shook his head and said, "No, everything. I want the whole check." I stood there unable to believe it, and when I tried to protest, my mother intervened and said it was only fair, that they had sacrificed a lot for me and that it was my turn to return the favor. So they took the whole check, and not just that one, all the following ones too. For 2 years, from 16 to 18, I worked at that grocery store and never saw a cent of my own money. Everything went directly to my father. I tried to hide cash a couple of times when customers gave me tips for helping them with bags, or when I worked extra shifts and got paid in cash. I'd save $10 or $20 in my backpack, but my father constantly checked my things and always found it. Once he found $35 I had saved over a month and yelled at me for being dishonest and treacherous, grounded me for 3 weeks, and on top of that kept the money. It was completely absurd. I was working like a slave, and couldn't even buy myself a hamburger with my own earnings. The worst part was that when I tried to talk to someone about this, with my uncles or with my friends' parents, everyone told me I was exaggerating, that my parents just wanted to teach me values, or that when I was older I'd understand. But I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. Because none of my coworkers had to give their entire paycheck to their parents. None lived with that level of control. Natalie was fed up too. She was 16 at the time and starting to work as well. And when she saw what was happening to me, she got furious, told me we had to do something, that we couldn't live like this forever. When I turned 18, I decided enough was enough. I had been saving in secret, like ridiculously small amounts that I hid in places my father would never check, like inside library books or at the bottom of my locker at school, and I managed to put together like $400 in 6 months, which I know doesn't sound like much, but for me it was everything. I found a room for rent through a coworker. It was basically a room in the house of an elderly lady who lived alone and needed help with rent. It cost $350 a month plus utilities, but I didn't care. I told my parents 2 weeks before moving out, thinking maybe they would understand, that they'd see I was already an adult and needed my space. But my father laughed in my face. He told me I wouldn't last a month outside, that I was going to come crawling back, begging them to let me return, that I was naive and didn't know how the real world worked. My mother agreed, said I was being selfish and immature, that no normal family lets their kids leave at 18, that I was going to regret it. But I left anyway. I remember that day perfectly. It was a Saturday morning. I packed my things in 2 suitcases and a backpack, literally everything I owned in the world, and called an Uber, because I knew if I tried to take my things to the bus stop, my father wasn't going to allow it. When the car arrived and I went out the door, my father was standing in the yard with his arms crossed, looked at me and said, "You're going to fail, and I'm going to be here to tell you I told you so." I didn't answer him, just got in the car and left. And I remember my hands were shaking, but at the same time I felt this incredible liberation, like I could finally breathe after being underwater for years. The first months living alone were super hard. I'm not going to lie. I worked at the grocery store and got another job, washing dishes at a restaurant. Like I worked 60 hours a week and barely had enough for rent and food. But it was my money, you understand? Every cent I earned was mine, and I could spend it on whatever I wanted without anyone telling me anything. I enrolled in community college for the next semester, just 2 classes because that's what I could afford. But it was a start. Natalie visited me secretly, took the bus after school, and we'd spend time together. She'd tell me how things were still at the house, which was basically just as horrible, but now all my father's attention was on her and not on me, which made me feel guilty but at the same time, relieved. About 2 years passed like that. 2 years in which I practically didn't talk to my parents except for occasional messages that were super cold like "Happy Birthday" or "Merry Christmas" and nothing more. I was fine with that. Honestly, I was building my own life and didn't need them. Or so I thought. I had moved from that room to a small studio of my own, had advanced in college, had friends, had a boss at the restaurant who treated me with respect. Things were going well. But then, like a year ago, I received a package in the mail. I wasn't expecting anything. So, when I saw it was from my parents' address, I got nervous. Thought maybe it was something sentimental, like old photos or something that belonged to me that they had forgotten to give me. I opened it, and inside was a bunch of papers, like 50 pages, and a letter from my father. The papers were loan documents, like a huge bank loan. We're talking about $80,000 or something like that, as primary debtors. The letter said, basically, that they had taken that loan years ago to start a business that didn't work out, that now they couldn't pay it, that the bank was suing them, and that since I was their son, it was my responsibility to help them pay the debt. I read that and literally couldn't process what I was seeing. It was so absurd that I laughed, like a nervous laugh of disbelief. But seriously, they expected me, who barely earned enough to support myself, who was working 2 jobs and going to school, who had managed to get out of their house and build something on my own, to help them pay $80,000 for a failed business I had no part in. The letter went on to say that if I didn't help them, I was being selfish. That family supports each other. that they had given me everything when I was a child and now it was my turn to return the favor. At the end, it said, I had 2 weeks to respond with a payment plan, or they would take legal action. Which made no sense. Because I wasn't on any of those documents, my name didn't appear anywhere. They couldn't legally force me to pay anything. I called them immediately. I was shaking with rage, and when my father answered, I yelled at him, Seriously? Do you seriously think I'm going to pay your debt? He went into condescending mode and told me it was the least I could do after everything they had done for me, that they had fed and clothed me for 18 years, that they had given me a roof, that without them I would be nothing. I told him that feeding and clothing your child is the minimum you're supposed to do as a parent, that they didn't do me a favor by doing the basics, and besides, they had kept all my money for 2 years when I worked as a teenager, so if anyone owed anything, we were even. He got furious, started yelling that I was ungrateful, that I was a horrible son, that I was going to regret it. My mother took the phone and started with her usual spiel. That family is the most important thing, that God wants us to honor our parents, that I was being cruel and selfish. I hung up on them. During the following weeks, they sent me literally 30 messages a day, calls at all hours, emails. They even showed up at my work once trying to talk to me, but my boss kicked them out. I sent them a letter, a certified physical letter so they couldn't say they didn't receive it, explaining very clearly that I wasn't going to help them with their debt, that I was done with their control over my life, that they needed to solve their own financial problems without involving me. I told them that if they contacted me again or showed up at my work or apartment, I was going to take legal action. I thought that would be enough, that they would understand and leave me alone. But no, things got worse. They started sending me messages with incredible guilt trips, like, your mother is sick from the stress you cause her. They're going to take the house because of you. How can you sleep knowing your risen is? Parents are suffering? They called Natalie, trying to get her to convince me to help them, but Natalie was 20 by then, and just as fed up as I was, told them to leave me alone and figure out their own life. They even contacted some distant relatives, uncles I hadn't seen since I was a kid, to call me and make me feel bad. And some did, sent me messages saying I was being cruel. How could I abandon my family in their time of need? I got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. I was having anxiety attacks, couldn't concentrate on school or work because I was constantly worried they would show up or try something. I talked to a lawyer who offered free consultations at the university, and he recommended I apply for a restraining order. At first, it seemed extreme to me. Like they're my parents. Am I really going to do that? But the lawyer told me I had all the necessary documentation, all the messages, recordings of calls I had started making, testimonies from witnesses who saw them, show up at my work, and that I had every right to protect myself. So, I did it. I applied for the restraining order, and after a hearing where my father tried to convince the judge that it was all a misunderstanding and that I was being manipulated by bad influences, the judge approved the order. My parents couldn't contact me in any way, couldn't come within 100 meters of my house or work, couldn't send me messages or call me or anything. The first week after the order was approved, I slept better than I had in months. It was like finally someone with authority had validated that what they were doing to me was wrong, that I wasn't crazy or being dramatic. It's been like 8 months since then, and I haven't heard anything from them, which is exactly what I want. Natalie moved out a few months ago too, got an apartment with a friend and is working while going to school, and we talk all the time. She completely understands why I did what I did and supports me completely. Sometimes I feel guilty, like maybe I was too harsh or if I should have given them another chance. But then I remember everything I lived through, all the control and abuse and manipulation, and I realize I did the right thing. A few days ago, unrelated to anything, I was at the restaurant working my evening shift, and a customer asked me how I was, like one of those casual questions people ask without expecting a real answer. And I said, good, honestly really good, and I realized it was true. I'm good. I have my little studio that I can afford. I have 2 jobs that respect me. I'm a year away from finishing my degree. I have a sister who loves and supports me, and I don't have to deal with toxic people who make me feel bad for existing. That's enough for now, I guess.